So you've started a new business and you're ready to hire a contractor. You're ready to start getting more clients. Maybe you want to set up a vendor table at a trade show booth area. But now what? What are your legal requirements needed? You need a contract in order to get all of that set up so that you are protected. And today, Billie Sinclair is joining me, who is a Legal Shield representative, and she's going to share with us some of the really important things that we need to know about contracts in running our business. And she's offering us with some really affordable solutions on how to make that all happen so that you have the peace of mind in getting those contracts in place and running your business legally and properly. So welcome to the show, Billie. So thank you so much for joining us again today, Billie. I so appreciate you taking the time to come and do some interviews with me, because there's so much information and misinformation that I felt it was really important that we share with our followers when it comes to the legalities involved in running our business. Now, first off, you're not a lawyer, but you are a Legal Shield representative, so you live and eat and breathe in this space. And I know that one of your key phrases is, "That's a great question for a lawyer." But today I wanted to dive into a little bit more about the importance of contracts. And contracts is not sexy. It's not something that people normally would love to get involved in and do, but it is so vitally important. Wouldn't you agree how important contracts are in a business?
I absolutely agree, and thanks for having me here, Susan. On the big picture, most of us, we just assume everything's going to work out.
Right.
And most of the time it does. But a contract protects you in the moment when something's not working out. Mm-hmm. When there was a miscommunication, you have to go back to the contract and say, wait a second, what did we agree to?
Yeah, and you were in Canada, and so trust is a big thing.
It is.
I know for me, I know definitely for many years I ran my business with nothing in writing. It was all verbal agreements and a trust that, well, yeah, you know what I'm doing, I know what you're doing, let's just do this. But that's not a very safe way of running a business. And
well, thanks for mentioning that. And in all fairness, if you're doing a $50 deal with someone, maybe the contract isn't the most important thing.
Right.
But as we grow our business and things get, everything gets bigger and we want it to get bigger, mm-hmm. there comes a point where you really should not be just running your business on a hope and a prayer. You have
Right.
to have the legal things in place.
Right. So last time that we talked about the importance of having a terms of agreement, terms of service in place, and even, have that as a page on your website to refer to. This is our general terms of contract or terms of service. And then when we're talking about contracts, what are the more important contracts that should be a staple item in a small business atmosphere? What kind of contracts should we have on our radar?
Well, I feel like one of the most important ones, and it still goes back to terms and conditions, but it's between you and your subcontractors, let's just say. Mm-hmm. So you're hiring people to represent you, to mm-hmm. do work for you. Mm-hmm. And it's very important that they understand how you're asking them to represent you in the world, and that they've agreed to that, and that they fully understand what they're doing when they're out there in the world working for you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, a lot of people are renting office space. Yeah. And that's a very important contract to have in place, mm-hmm. so that you know what you've agreed to. Even, especially in today's very, very often people are doing co-working.
Right.
So what
mm-hmm.
are my rights and responsibilities in this co-working space? Mm-hmm. You're working there when maybe the owner of the co-working space isn't there because they can't be there 24/7, but maybe they've opened their doors and they have a fob system and people can come and go as they please. Mm-hmm. So it's not enough just to like the idea of something. You really have to know what you're agreeing to.
Yeah, good ones. Are there any other examples of contracts that are super important?
I was thinking of a lot of small and solopreneurs are participating in vendor events.
Yes.
And we know what it's going to cost, say, to set up the table. Maybe it's going to be a $50 deal, but maybe it's going to be a $500 deal. And the bigger the show, the more people think, well, this is just what everyone does. But no, I think the bigger the show, the bigger the expense, the more reason for you to know what you've agreed to and what might be some areas of risk. So really, contracts are about mitigating risk. Sometimes you are writing a contract to protect yourself. You want someone else to sign it. Sometimes they are giving you the contract for you to sign. And in both of those scenarios, it's very important that you know your rights, your responsibilities, and your risks. Because like I said, everything goes going great until it isn't. And then something goes wrong. Someone miscommunicated something. Someone misunderstood something. Someone did something that hadn't been even in your realm of possibilities. And now you've got to go back to the contract to see what steps you can take.
Yeah. And I just thought of another type of contract is when you're being hired. So when somebody is hiring you, if it's a service, obviously if it's more of a service-based thing, you need to have a contract in terms of, okay, this is what I've promised, this is the deliverables, and have the, your client sign that so that they understand what you're going to be delivering. Because often I find that sometimes there's a lot of assumptions that happen when in a service-based space where, the person doing the hiring is assuming that this, and this is also going to happen, but it's not in the contract. It hasn't been discussed. So for both parties concerned, whether you're hiring somebody or whether you're the one who's offering the service, those details really need to be detailed in that contract.
Right. And let's just take a minute to say that it's not enough that you wrote up a contract and they signed it. It's legal, but is there enough in there? Are you actually protected? So focusing on the legal aspect of contracts and the aspect of having it reviewed by a lawyer and they have different eyes. They see things differently. They're contract specialists. So going back to the risks, they can really determine, well, this is all covered here, but this is not covered. And so sometimes when people send us a contract, it's 10 pages. Do you think we're going to read all that? And do you think if we did read it, we would even understand half of it? Right. We can't read it with that eye to recognize what are the risks that we could potentially find ourselves in. So it's really important to have that legal advice when we're creating a contract.
And that's so true. I think you even have a story about when you were just mentioning about the not reading the 10-page document. We just have that trust that everything is fine and that we sign and then we make assumptions, right?
Right. I can actually share a story if you like. And this was my personal story. And I'm a small business owner. So I was looking for a part-time office space. And I saw some people on social media talking about it. I decided to go and check it out. I liked the space. I liked the ladies. And I liked the price that they were quoting me. So I said, okay, what do we do next? And they said, we'll just send over our agreement. Well, our agreement turned out to be a 7-page document that was complete legalese. I'm telling you that at any other time in my life, I would have just signed it.
Right.
Nice ladies, good price, I like the space. What else is there?
Right.
But this time I had access to a lawyer. I could actually have someone review it. So I called the law firm. I told them what I needed. The lawyer called me back and said, sure, just send the contract over so I can take a look at it, call you back tomorrow. When he called back, he showed me that there was 3 clauses in there that he thought could be problematic for me in the future. What I was going to be agreeing to was that if some damage in the premises was deemed to be mine, I had already agreed to take responsibility for it.
Wow.
Because I was renting the space when the ladies weren't necessarily going to be there. They had some blank times in their calendar. They thought, well, if we could rent it out while we're not here, then we're making better use of the space. The second part was that if I did not agree to that damage that they said I made, I have already agreed for them to take me to small claims court.
Oh my. Just skip all the niceties.
And then the third thing was that because I had agreed for them to take me to small claims court, that was already in, but this this clause in the contract said that I also agreed to pay their legal fees.
I was just thinking that you're going to be spending taking care of all the legal fees. Wow.
So just imagine, like, I'm not saying I wouldn't have caught that.
Right.
But there's 10 pages or 7 pages, and you've got a lot of reading to do, and we're all super busy.
Right.
And so we might skim it.
Sure.
And having that, again, lawyer who has a contract eye pointed out to me, I said, well, what are my options? And he said, well, you can scratch out those 3 clauses and submit it back to them stating that you'll agree if these clauses are removed. So that's why I said about the negotiation piece. Or you can just decide not to do business with them at all.
Yeah.
And I just made a decision not to do business with them at all because it just wasn't important enough for me, that particular space. And the second part of it was just that if they should have mentioned something to me ahead of time, and maybe then I would feel a little bit more trust with them. But because they threw that at me in the contract with no discussion, I was just like, no. So having the ability to have a contract reviewed and read and discussed gives you, again, options so that you can look at your risks.
So our viewers are going, yeah, that's great. I can't afford a $400 lawyer. So what can they do? What can people do who just don't have that kind of budget?
Right. So thanks for mentioning that. The reason I was able to call my law firm was because I'm a Legal Shield member. And having a very small monthly subscription gave me the ability to pick up the phone and call a lawyer with no additional cost. So it was just great to have that freedom. And I've called them on numerous different kinds of situations just to say, what are my rights? What are my responsibilities? What might my next steps be? And being able to have that freedom without getting the stress of having a bill for $300 or $400 an hour, it just really empowers me to have a stronger business that is, more predictable for me.
I can see that having that kind of subscription also gives you peace of mind, right? Like you just don't have to worry whether you're signing a contract or whether you need to write up a contract for whatever purpose. You've got that peace of mind of having a lawyer at your fingertips for that subscription. So how can people find out more about Legal Shield? People can come to you and ask questions and find out more about what their options are?
Absolutely. So once I was a happy member, I decided that I needed to share this with women and men and families and small businesses. So, of course, I'm very available on social media. You mentioned that there are going to be links below our video here. I'm very happy to answer people's questions. I'm available on all the social media channels that you can imagine. And I'm very low pressure. Just ask me your questions. I'm happy to answer them and explain how it works.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Billie. I so appreciate it, and I know our audience really appreciates it as well, because this is an area that we really don't know a lot about, right? And one of the things that we talked about in a previous interview that we did is the concern and the and you're almost setting yourself up for some liabilities is when you just have a question and you go to social media and ask, what do I do about this? How do I set up a contract? Are there any free templates out there that I can use to create a contract with, which is also very dangerous. And so I appreciate you kind of bringing to light what our options are, because many of us are just on a low budget, and we just don't have that kind of funds available to have that lawyer at our fingertips. So I appreciate you coming along.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah, so that's it for today's episode of Your Business Edge. I so appreciate you joining us, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye for now.